Hi, Misha here, and we are finally coming to the end in our last class, the Crossfield-class, consisting in the series from Discovery of the USS Discovery and her slightly older sister ship, the USS Glenn. And there's also a presumptive USS Crossfield, although we haven't seen it yet. And even though this is the hero ship of the show, to many, it's maybe one of the most unusual, or dare I say, even least attractive. So, as we've done with the previous vessels, we'll talk about its in-universe specs, compare it to some older and later Starfleet ships, and just kind of wrap things up here. So let's get to it. The Crossfield class takes flat to a whole new level. Let's mention primary shapes. It's unique, I'll give it that for sure. Definitely no other ship has this silhouette, although one ship in the future actually is reminiscent of this. We'll get to it. Anyway, in universe, this was first launched in 2255 and in service by 2256. It was created to be a science research vessel and test bed for new technologies. It's said to be able to have 300 or more independent experiments types missions on board. Although it has a relatively small crew, minimal crew is about 90. Maximum standard crew is about 180, although it can support 300. And in the show, we see it with around 135, 136. So, yeah, not the biggest crew, but considering so much is given away in this ship to research and technology, and considering Enterprise, the Constitution of this same era, housed about 200, that works. And as I've done throughout the series, the length. On paper, it's 750 meters according to Eagle Moss. Dividing that by 2/3 gets us right at 500 meters, which is still very long. However, I will point out that the Vulcan Dekir type command cruiser, combat cruiser from Enterprise was actually 600 meters, and much like the Crossfield here, it was very flat. A habitable volume because of that is about the same as a Connie. Now it's said to have 17 to 18 decks. I guess this is possible, but even at 500 meters, when you consider the nacelles take up a lot of that, I don't know if it's really thick enough for that. Oh well, it is what it is. This was a science ship initially, but of course because of the war, it was kind of retroactively made into a warship, and thanks to the whole spore drive thing, it was a pretty effective one. It's pretty experimental class. There's only a few members. Yada yada. Boop. So off the stand, we see we've got a interesting shape to the secondary hull with very wide pylons and very long, thin nacelles. There is a bit of a bulge in the bottom, which I guess, if you count this, I guess it could have 18 decks. The engineering hull, and a relatively small, very angular deflector there. And of course we have this segmented saucer. I could get used to that, but I think the spinning thing is really silly. I'm not gonna lie. Moving parts on large ships is never a good idea. The Bassard collectors are kind of unique on this too, the way they're segmented. Internal layout is pretty typical Starfleet, with bridge on deck 1. There's a mess hall on deck 2, a second mess hall on deck 5, sick bays on deck 4, crew quarters and scientific installations are throughout the saucer, and actually there's a number of science bays in the drive section as well. And then there's a large shuttle bay in the back, which would make sense for a ship of this mission type. And then there's 2 relatively large impulse manifolds in the back. Not counting the spore drive, this has a max speed of about warp 8. Photon torpedoes, phasers. It does have quite a powerful tractor beam system, which for a science ship would make sense. And yeah, very much a specialist vessel. And of course you can talk about it more for the show, but where does it fit in kind of the space chronology, or does it, or can it? Discovery is a weird concept, but Star Trek is no stranger to that. Even though they don't look the same, I can't help but think about the Ring ship, Enterprise XCV-330. I think maybe it's because we do have these sections that are not the same, but have a certain nod to this segmented saucer here. And then these long nacelles kind of remind me. If nothing else, this shows you that early human ships were not always the Starfleet pattern we know. Of course, this is just a background ship, but it's a background ship that pops up in pictures really since 1979, the motion picture. It's been an Enterprise. It pops up, so it's canonical, but it was certainly something different. But of course, it wasn't a hero ship. It was just one of those things. But I just wanted to show this real quick. I don't know. This kind of reminds me a bit of it. And another unconventional design that's a fan favorite, the Daedalus class. This kind of reminds me of it in a certain spiritual way too, because we have an abnormal saucer and we have a large drive. But again, it's just mostly I brought it out to show that yeah, not everything is the standard profile. Ironically, this one has a bit of an issue of, by the numbers being scaled maybe a little too small for its stated crew and everything. Oh well. Who doesn't like the Daedalus? And this certainly doesn't resemble later ships. But when they designed this, they were trying to go retro, and they weren't trying to make a hero ship. Some people wish the original NX had been a Daedalus or whatever. This is a neat Easter egg background ship, but I'm having a hard time imagining this as a hero ship on screen. And hell, I'm blind, and even to me that would not really seem like something. Still, yeah, a different take from Starfleet. Now, I said earlier there's a ship in the canon that the Crossfield kind of reminds me a little bit of. The Excelsior, or rather, I picked the Enterprise B variant here. I'm not saying they look the same, but there is something. I think it's that it has a relatively small saucer, a long star drive, long nacelles. They don't look as long because the star drive is extended out with them, but if this had a longer secondary hull, it would make up for the long nacelles a bit. And the reason I picked the B is actually because of these fins coming off the deflector. They give it a more angular shape down here, and the Crossfield itself kind of has subdued finnage, or at least patterning on the edges. Again, not direct, but I don't know. There's something kind of spiritually similar here. And I think it's because they were both designed to be not the Enterprise, not the Constitution, and they were both designed to look fast and modern. But actually, the Crossfield concept dates back to the 70s. And just because they were close to hand, here are those Excelsior concepts again, which are technically canon because the models, the study models, did appear. And yeah, this goes to show you this very odd shape and small saucer and long nacelles, and this kind of even has kind of the triangular form drive section here. Yeah, this looks a lot like these in some angles and aspects. But the Crossfield wasn't based on an Excelsior concept. It was actually loosely based on a Constitution refit concept from the aborted Planet of the Titans television movie, 1976. And it did have the very squashed down saucer and triangular star drive, but it didn't have the long nacelles or the cutouts in the saucer. It too was actually made canon because the study model labeled B24CLN was put into some background shots and was even featured in the graveyard scene of Best of Both Worlds, and more prominently and more visible in the scene of unification at the Qualler depot, the surplus yard. So, and it's been, you know, shown in the background of star bases and that kind of thing a few times in the movies. Not exactly the same as this, but there's a family resemblance. And since the B24CLN is technically canon, it's reaching, but it's at least reaching for something. And there is one future design that kind of seems reminiscent of the Crossfield a bit to me too. For some reason, and I really don't know if I could tell you exactly why, the concept of Voyager reminds me a bit. I think it's the very long nacelles, large star drive, relatively small saucer. I don't know, there's something there. This always kind of reminded me of an Excelsior updated anyway, so I think that's the main connective tissue. The fact that it's just so long versus so thin versus the Crossfield. I don't know. What do you think? I just thought I'd bring it out for a minute. As far as the future ships, it's kind of the one that reminds me the most. But again, this is just a concept, so it's not really canon. But my video, so I can put it in if I want to. With that, let's wrap things up. You know, for a science ship, Discovery was pretty good at combat. Certainly better than the Oberth. I pointed it out before, but just to say it again, if this seems more advanced than a Constitution, even in universe, that's okay. Again, the class was first launched in 2255. The Constitution class was first launched 30 years earlier. Now, the Enterprise herself was launched 10 years earlier, 2245. And of course, refits and all that take place. But this was technically a newer class. That doesn't necessarily excuse some of the things, but it helps a bit. I really don't mind the secondary hull. And I actually kind of like the unusual deflector. The cutout in the saucer, I could do without. The spinning, I definitely don't care for. And the nacelles, I don't need them to be this long. Some of the concepts, they were a little bit shorter. I don't want them to get them stubby, but if they'd end, about here. Let's say they were about 1/3 shorter, even 1/4 shorter. I'd like that. A lot, frankly. I'm not the biggest fan of super long nacelles. It's personal taste. Front view's okay on this. Yeah, it's an interesting hero ship, but probably not for everyone. Definitely keeping that thin motif from Discovery. The series, not the ship. Although the ship too. And of course, in newer seasons, we have the Discovery A, which there's not a model out from Eaglemoss yet. It's coming, but they've been very slow in shipping this year. So who knows when we'll get the A for sure. But that kind of wraps up our look of the Disco fleet. I'll do at least one more video kind of with some final thoughts after really manhandling all of these. See if my opinion changed from the initial introduction overview video. But I think that's enough for me for one day. But do let me know what you think, one way or t'other. This is the standard size, if I didn't say. It's not the XL. I don't typically buy their XLs. I've tried them, but I don't know. Just don't really have much of a point. These are perfectly good size. So I appreciate you hanging out today. As always, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. All that fun, good stuff. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.